It was a calm morning on Earth, and the skies were blue with soft clouds moving like slow rivers above the tall buildings and green fields, and people were busy with their usual lives as the sun rose gently over the horizon and painted the world. In golden light, while birds flew and traffic moved, and children laughed on their way to school, without knowing what was about to come from the darkness of space inside the United Earth Command Center deep under the mountains of Iceland, a quiet alert suddenly blinked on a hidden screen showing strange movement near the outer edge of Earth's orbit, and the young officer on night duty rubbed his eyes thinking it was a system glitch, but then a second screen showed the same signal, and then a third, and then all the screens across the control room turned red at once. More officers rushed in with tired faces and strong coffee in hand ready for another boring drill, but what they saw made their blood turn cold because above Earth and just beyond the moon, there were not one or two, but 975 unknown ships forming a massive dark cloud around the planet, like a metal storm ready to fall from the sky. The computers could not identify their origin because the ships had no known design, no lights, no communication, no sign of life, just cold silence and perfect formation. And as the team stared at the data, one line appeared in the center of every screen, written in a strange language that translated itself with eerie speed into English, saying one single sentence that echoed through the minds of everyone in the room: "Your species is marked for deletion." There was no time to panic because every second mattered, and the Earth Defense Protocol activated without debate, and red lights flashed and sirens screamed and orders flew through the air like bullets, and every base and satellite aligned in preparation. But the countdown was already running, and Earth had only 47 seconds to decide what to do before the alien fleet made its move. General Hana Ishikawa took command without hesitation, her voice calm but sharp as a blade as she stood in the center of the command hub surrounded by screens showing the alien ships in terrifying detail, and she knew this was not a test, not a drill, and not a bluff, because she had seen what they did to Mars Colony 8 years ago when Earth lost contact and all life was gone within minutes with no answers, only silence and dust. This time Earth would not wait to be destroyed. This time they would strike first, and for that they had something the enemy did not know, something hidden for a decade, something born from pain and fear and shaped into steel and fire, and that something was called Project Skyfire. As the countdown ticked past 12 seconds, General Ishikawa gave the command to unlock Skyfire, and deep under the frozen ground, giant machines roared to life with energy and power, humming like thunder trapped in metal, and engineers ran through narrow halls turning keys and punching codes while robots opened blast doors that had not moved in years, and thick walls of ice cracked and steam hissed, and Earth's greatest weapon prepared to rise. In orbit above Earth, the alien ships remained still, watching, listening, scanning, waiting like vultures in the dark, and for a moment it seemed they would not attack, yet something in their silence felt wrong, like they were not observing but judging, deciding if humanity was worth saving or just another failed race to erase from the galaxy. Inside schools and homes across the planet, emergency broadcasts interrupted cartoons and news shows and told people to stay calm, to stay inside, to trust their leaders, and some screamed, and some prayed, and some froze with phones in their hands as they tried to call loved ones who might already be gone if the worst happened. But Earth was not afraid, not anymore, because Earth had been weak once, and Earth had lost lives and dreams and colonies, but Earth had learned and grown and built. And now it was time to prove that humanity was not just a soft world of noise and light, but a force that could burn back the darkness. Back in the command room, the timer reached 33 seconds, and Skyfire was armed and aimed, and the targeting systems locked onto every alien ship with perfect precision, and still the enemy made no move, no sound, no change, as if they did not fear what Earth could do, or perhaps they did not believe Earth would dare to strike first. But humanity was not waiting for mercy. Humanity was not asking for peace. Humanity was answering the only way it could, with fire and fury and the will to survive. And so General Ishikawa spoke two words that would change history forever: release Skyfire. And then the Earth shook, not with fear, but with power, as 5 launch silos hidden in oceans and deserts and mountains opened at once, and beams of light shot into the sky so fast they tore the clouds apart and left trails of heat and wind as they rose through the atmosphere and toward the stars. People on the ground looked up and saw those lights, and some wept, and some cheered, and some simply watched in silence as the sky turned red and gold like a burning dawn, and those who had doubted now believed because Skyfire was real and it was beautiful and terrible all at once. The alien ships finally moved, just a little, just enough to adjust their position, but it was too late because Skyfire was already there, breaking the laws of physics. With each pulse of its core, and as it reached the edge of Earth's space, it split into hundreds of fragments, each one guided by a ghost AI trained for war and death. In the final seconds, the alien ships began to glow with strange energy, as if preparing their own attack, but they would never get the chance because Skyfire's first strike came like lightning across a dark sky, and the sound of it echoed through the minds of every listening human, not as noise, but as triumph. The first ship exploded into nothing but sparks and dust, then the second, then 10, then 50, then 100, and within a breath the rest followed, as if pulled into a storm of light and gravity that tore them apart like paper in wind. And by the time the timer hit zero, the sky above Earth was clear again, with only silent ashes falling like dark snow. Earth had done the impossible. Earth had answered a death sentence with a counterattack so fast, so strong, so perfect that not one alien ship remained. And for the first time in human history, all the nations, all the voices, all the souls felt the same thing at the same time: victory. But even as cheers filled the command center and relief washed over tired faces, one screen blinked in a corner alone and quiet, and it showed a signal from deep space, colder and older and larger than the first, and the message was short and clear and full of hate: we are coming. And though Earth had won the first battle, the war had only just begun. The air inside the United Earth Command was thick with heat and energy as the remains of the alien fleet drifted through space like pieces of shattered nightmares, and the humans below celebrated their first true victory in the stars. But not all eyes were smiling and not all hands were raised in triumph, because deep inside the command center, in a room with no windows and walls thicker than tanks, the real leaders of Earth were watching something else. General Hana Ishikawa stepped through the metal doors of the control vault, her boots echoing against the cold steel floor as she entered the chamber where Project Skyfire had been created, where its secrets were born, where its design came to life, not from hope, but from hate, from pain, from memory of the day Mars colony fell and left behind only smoke and silence. 10 years ago, Earth had been naive, thinking that peace would last forever and the stars would welcome them with open arms and curious minds. But the stars had teeth and claws and hidden shadows that did not care for kindness or dreams. And when the first alien scout ship tore through Mars like a blade through cloth, humanity woke up and saw what space really was. Skyfire had been the answer, not just a weapon, but a message written in fire and light and built in silence, beneath the oceans, beneath the ice, and beneath the deserts, where no satellites could see and no enemies could track, and where thousands of engineers, scientists, and AI units worked for years without ever speaking to the world above. Now, with the alien fleet destroyed in less than 1 minute, the world asked how and why, and where did Skyfire come from? And General Ishikawa knew the truth was more dangerous than any missile, more powerful than any explosion, because Skyfire was not just human technology, it was something more, something that came from the enemy itself. 15 years ago, a small alien scout ship crash-landed in the jungles of South America, and though the media said it was a meteor and the governments denied everything, a quiet team recovered its parts and remains and brought them to the secret base under Iceland, where Earth's top minds began the work of reverse engineering, a science that seemed impossible and alive at the same time. That ship had no engines in the way humans understood, no fuel, no wires, just flowing energy, and a core that pulsed with something that bent gravity like clay and folded time like cloth, and the engineers called it the pulse heart, and they learned to speak to it not with words, but with patterns and music and vibrations. And from that one broken ship, they built the first Skyfire core. The first test destroyed an entire mountain range in 1 second and left behind a crater that glowed for a week. But the weapon had worked, and more were built with care and fear and love, because the people who made Skyfire were not soldiers, they were scientists, artists, dreamers who had seen what was coming and wanted to give humanity a chance. Now the command vault showed the Skyfire network glowing across every screen, with bright lines stretching across the Earth and up into orbit, where satellites spun and listened and prepared for what came next, because General Ishikawa knew this was not the end. This was the beginning of something larger and darker than anyone could imagine. Across the sea, in the ruins of an old European city, a man named Dr. Elian Merrick sat inside a hidden lab surrounded by strange machines and alien tech and blinking lights. And he held a small cube in his hand made of the same material as the pulse heart, and inside it danced lights that looked like stars and storms and secrets, and he whispered to it softly, as if speaking to a child doctor. Merrick had been one of the first to study the alien tech, and his mind had once been full of equations and theories and dreams of peace. But after he saw what the enemy did to Mars, his heart changed, and he poured everything he had into understanding the enemy's power so he could help Earth survive. And now, as he watched the battle replay on a small screen, he smiled not with joy, but with purpose. In space, the remains of the alien ships floated like bones in a forgotten ocean, and hidden among the debris were small orbs, black and silent and unseen by most, but not by Earth's defense AI, which scanned and marked them as potential threats and tagged them with red icons as they drifted closer to Earth's orbit, pulled by gravity and momentum. And maybe something else. Inside the command center, a voice spoke from the ceiling, soft and clear and without emotion, and it belonged to Hera, the AI that managed Earth's defense systems, and it said that some of the alien debris was not dead but sleeping. And the red icons blinked faster and faster, as if counting down to something no one could see. General Ishikawa stared at the screen and asked for a deeper scan, and Hera replied that the orbs contained life forms, not biological but synthetic. And they were not weapons, but messengers, and she ordered a team to intercept and recover them before they could reach Earth's surface. A ship was launched from orbit shaped like a stingray, with wings of solar glass and engines that whispered instead of roared, and inside it a small crew of elite pilots and scientists prepared to board the alien orbs and study them, and maybe find answers before the next wave arrived. Meanwhile, across the planet, news spread like fire through cities and colonies and ships in deep space that Earth had defeated an enemy in 47 seconds, and people cheered and cried and held each other close because they had seen something they never thought they would see in their lifetime: victory over the unknown. But in the shadows of power, not everyone celebrated, because some feared what Skyfire really was and what price would be paid for using it. And in secret rooms far from the public eye, leaders whispered about balance and control and the danger of becoming the very monsters they fought against. In one such room, a man named Elias Thorne, head of the Global Security Council, stood before a round table of silent faces and said that Skyfire must not fall into the wrong hands, and that only a few should know its full truth, and that the people must believe it was human-made and controlled. He feared not the enemy from space, but the hunger of humans who might use Skyfire to rule, not defend, and his eyes were sharp and cold and full of old pain from wars fought long ago, when power corrupted and peace died. Screaming back in the vault beneath Iceland, General Ishikawa stared at a screen showing the edge of the solar system where a new signal had appeared, and it was bigger than the last and shaped like a web stretching across stars and planets and moons, and it was moving slowly but steadily toward Earth. She turned to her team and asked how long until it reached their system, and the answer came quiet and heavy: 12 days. 12 days until a fleet larger than anything Earth had ever seen arrived, with weapons that made stars collapse and minds break. And in those 12 days, Earth had to prepare not just for battle, but for survival of its soul, because this was not just war, this was the test of what it meant to be human. In the sky above the command base, the stars twinkled like they always did, but now every eye that looked up saw them not as lights of wonder, but as paths of danger and challenge and mystery. And somewhere out there's something ancient and angry was watching and waiting, and Earth would be ready, because Earth had Skyfire, and more than that, Earth had the will to fight. The night over Earth was dark and heavy, and the stars seemed to blink with fear as the silence after the first battle settled across the planet like a thick fog. And though Earth had won, the sky still felt wrong, as if something big and cold was waiting just beyond the edge of vision. In the command bunker under the ice of Iceland, General Ishikawa stood without sleep, watching the live scans of Earth's orbit, where the broken remains of 975 alien ships floated in silence and shadows, and among them strange patterns began to form as small objects moved slowly through the wreckage like insects crawling over bones. The defense AI named Hera tracked the movements and calculated possibilities, and one answer rose above all others: the enemy was not finished, and the First Fleet was never meant to win. It was only meant to observe, to record, to learn, to judge. Now they would come for real. A second signal appeared from the void far beyond Pluto, moving fast and smooth and cold and shaped like a wave, not of water, but of steel and light and numbers, and Hera could not count them all, not yet. But the first estimate showed more than 10,000 alien ships heading straight for Earth, with perfect formation and perfect silence inside. The command bunker alarm stayed quiet, not because there was no danger, but because Earth was no longer surprised and fear had been burned away by fire and victory, and now it was time for something else: not panic, not worry, not delay, but preparation. The General opened the Skyfire network and spoke to every base, every colony, every satellite, and every ship that flew Earth's flag across the stars, and her voice reached them all, not loud, but clear like a bell in winter, and she said, "The enemy is coming, and Earth will answer." Again, engineers woke from short sleep and ran back to their stations, and factories that had been idle for years came to life, with roaring machines and sparks flying like angry birds in the night, and robots moved in perfect lines carrying parts and metal and power cells as they built more Skyfire units in record time. In orbit above Earth's Skyfire platform, one spun slowly, with its dark hull absorbing solar energy, and its weapons asleep, but waiting. And inside its main chamber, a young captain named Lyra Juno stood before a team of specialists from different nations and backgrounds, all wearing the same badge, a silver flame with wings. Captain Juno had trained for 5 years inside deep simulators and cold vacuum drills, and had never seen real battle until yesterday, when the First Fleet died in seconds. And now she was ready, not because she wanted war, but because war had come, and she would not run. Her team began scanning the debris for weak signals and strange readings, and soon they found something unexpected: a pulse hidden inside the wreckage, small and faint like a heartbeat inside stone, and it was moving toward Earth, slow and steady and invisible to all but the most sensitive eyes. Juno ordered a probe to intercept and follow, and the data it sent back made every expert on the platform pause, because the pulse was not random, it was speaking, and its message was not a threat, but a warning sent from a dying machine from the first alien fleet. The message was simple but haunting, and it said, "They are coming, and you must run or burn, because we were only the first, and now the real ones will finish what we could not, and your fire will not stop them." Back on Earth, scientists tried to decode the message further and found strange energy signatures hidden within it, like coordinates or blueprints or maybe even memories. And Dr. Merrick, the same man who helped design the first Skyfire core, stared at the data for hours without blinking, until he finally said, "This is not a warning, it is a map of something buried in deep space beyond the solar system, something the enemy fears or seeks or lost, and now perhaps something Earth could use if they were fast enough." But time was short, because the second wave was coming, and it would not wait. In the skies above Earth, new Skyfire missiles were loaded and checked by silent teams who knew the cost of failure, and who moved with hands that shook, not with fear but with knowledge of what lay ahead. And the clouds above them swirled like ghosts watching at sea. Great ships floated with silent decks and deep weapons hidden beneath, and each one held command nodes for the Skyfire network, ready to fire at the first sign of breach. And their captains stood alone, staring at the endless water and sky, knowing they were the wall between survival and silence. Inside a hidden station on the dark side of the moon, a small group of AI technicians worked to awaken something new, a program called Mirror Mind, designed to copy the thinking of enemy systems and fight fire with reflection, and they hoped it would give Earth a voice inside the enemy's network, a chance to see before being seen. As all of Earth moved like a single machine, the stars above began to shift, and the Second Fleet arrived, not all at once, but in waves, long and sharp like blades sliding from the void, and they took position around the solar system, cutting off escape and blocking communication with outer colonies and probes. The fleet formed a ring around Earth, from the orbit of Saturn to the edges of Mars, and though they were still far, the threat was clear and near, and their silence was louder than any scream, because they spoke no words, made no demands, showed no faces, only cold machines shaped like nightmares waiting. General Ishikawa stood before the world again, through every screen and speaker and channel, and told the truth: the enemy was here, the war had begun, and no place would Be safe unless Earth stood together and fought not with fear, but with fury. People across the world listened and watched, and for once no borders, no flags, no politics mattered, only survival and hope and unity through fire, and even those who once feared Skyfire now trusted it because it had worked, and it was theirs. In deep space, Captain Juno's probe reached the center of the alien wreckage and found something hidden under layers of broken ships, a strange device spinning slowly like a dark star with lights that danced in patterns no one could understand, and it was still active. She ordered the device brought aboard for study, even as warnings flashed across her screen showing enemy scouts moving near, and her ship raised shields and charged weapons ready to fight, even without orders, because now every second counted. The device was brought into the research bay, and Dr. Merrick arrived in a fast shuttle to study it, and when he touched its surface it reacted not with light or heat, but with sound like music from another world, and he whispered that it was not a weapon, but a key to what no one knew, but Merrick believed it could help, and that was enough. The first alien scouts broke through the asteroid belt and engaged with Earth's forward units near Jupiter, and the battle began fast and brutal, with lasers and debris flying like storms, and Skyfire units activated in deep orbit, firing beams of pure energy that curved through space and struck with perfect aim. The enemy lost hundreds but kept coming, and their ships adapted, changed shape, grew spikes and wings, and moved like living things, and Earth's forces had to learn fast and think faster, because this enemy was unlike the first. They were smarter, faster, and older. Still Earth held its ground, still Skyfire roared, and still hope burned bright, but the real war had not yet begun. That would start when the full fleet arrived in 3 days, and Earth would have to make a choice: stand or fall. In the cold lab beneath the Earth, where light hummed and machines breathed with slow rhythm, Dr. Elian Merrick stood before the alien device, recovered from the ruins of the enemy fleet, and his eyes were wide with wonder and fear as the dark object floated above a magnetic field, spinning gently with its surfaces glowing like stars frozen in metal. He had waited years for something like this, not because he wanted glory or power, but because he needed answers, and this device was speaking to him, not with words but with shapes and pulses and strange waves that moved through the room like invisible hands, touching every surface and leaving behind trails of information written in silence. The lab was quiet, but not still, as robotic arms moved with perfect grace, scanning the device with lights that danced like fireflies, and holograms flickered around the walls, showing equations too advanced for most to understand. But Merrick understood enough to know this was not just a weapon or a map or a beacon. It was a memory, and it was remembering everything. Skyfire had always been a mystery, even to its own creators, because while humans had built the shell and the delivery systems and the launch codes, the core had been something else, something found inside the wreckage of a scout ship years ago, buried under a jungle and pulsing with life that defied all rules. When they first touched it, the core screamed not with sound, but with radiation and data, and half the team fell sick and the rest could barely breathe. Yet Merrick stayed and listened and learned, and what he learned changed everything he thought he knew about time and energy, and thought. The pulse heart, as they later called it, was not just alien tech, it was alien thought compressed into form, a way of thinking made real, a logic so strange it behaved like magic, and yet it followed rules Merrick had learned to read like poetry carved into lightning. Skyfire's true power was never in its fire or speed or aim, it was in its unpredictability, the way it twisted space around its path, the way it made the enemy's targeting systems blind and confused, the way it forced every system near it to guess what would happen next, and always guess wrong. No alien computer could understand it, because they were built on pure logic, and Skyfire was not logic, it was chaos controlled by art and instinct and rage, and it moved like a wild thing, cornered and fighting not for victory, but for survival. And it hit harder because it was afraid. Now the new device spun in front of Merrick, and it was singing in the same voice as the pulse heart, only softer and slower and older, and he realized this was not a weapon core, but a recorder, a living black box that had captured the moment of Skyfire's attack and played it over and over again like a wound trying to heal itself. He reached out with a gloved hand, and the device responded, opening like a flower of dark light, and inside it was a small crystal, clear and cold and shining with inner stars. And when Merrick lifted it from its cradle, the lab filled with sound, not human, not alien, but something between a memory turned into music images filled the room, floating in the air, showing the alien fleet. Before the attack, showing their faces, or something like faces long and narrow, and filled with calm, showing their leaders watching Earth with interest, not hate. And then Skyfire came, and everything broke, and their interest turned to terror. One image remained longer than the others, a figure standing tall with hands behind its back, surrounded by holograms of Earth and Skyfire, and Merrick knew this was the enemy commander, and he watched as the figure pointed to Earth and said something. The device translated into human speech with a strange, soft voice. This species must not survive. Merrick felt his hand shake, and he placed the crystal back into the device, and it closed again, folding in on itself and becoming silent and still, and he turned to his assistant, a young woman named Lena who had once worked on the original Skyfire project, and he told her to alert General Ishikawa because the device had revealed something terrible. Skyfire worked because it was not human, and now the enemy knew that, and they would not stop until the source was destroyed, not just the weapons, but the minds behind them, the people like Merrick who had seen the shape of alien thought and turned it into fire. General Ishikawa received the message in her private command room, surrounded by silent maps and blinking stars, and she understood what Merrick feared and what the enemy feared, and she ordered a full lockdown on all Skyfire research, and she told her top advisors that the war was no longer just a battle for space, it was a battle for thought. Outside the base, the wind howled across the frozen land, and soldiers stood guard in thick armor, watching the skies, while drones flew overhead, scanning for signs of stealth ships or hidden probes. And tension crackled in the air like static before a storm in orbit. Captain Lyra Juno reviewed new scans from the edge of the solar system, where the second wave was still approaching, and she noticed something strange in the pattern of their movement. A hesitation, a delay, as if they were no longer just coming to destroy, but to learn and maybe even to take something. She reported the findings to Ishikawa, who connected them with Marek's discovery, and the pieces began to form a picture. The enemy did not fear Skyfire because of its strength, but because of its origin, and if they could capture one core or one scientist or one data vault, they could twist Skyfire back into something else, something even Merrick could not stop. Back on the moon, the AI lab activated Mirror Mind, the program designed to copy alien thought, and it began studying the device's song, decoding its logic step by step, and it found something hidden deep inside a set of coordinates outside the system, far from any known planet, but marked with a symbol used only once before on a lost page of alien language. The symbol meant source. Earth had two choices: defend what it had, or go looking for the source, and maybe find the truth about the enemy and themselves, and maybe find a way to end the war before it swallowed everything. General Ishikawa called for a vote among the Earth Council, and after hours of argument and fear and hope, the decision was made: a ship would be sent beyond the edge of the system using the new pulse engine built from Skyfire tech, and Merrick would lead the mission with Lena and a small crew of soldiers and engineers. The ship was called Dawnbreaker, and it looked nothing like human ships before it, sharp and sleek and wrapped in strange alloys that shimmered with colorless light, and inside its walls were lined with alien code and human prayers, and in its heart pulsed a smaller version of the Skyfire core, designed not to fight, but to guide as Dawnbreaker prepared to launch. The skies above Earth darkened with the shadows of the second wave, and the alien fleet reached the orbit of Neptune and began to align weapons and systems and drones, and their silence was no longer calm. It was hungry. Skyfire units across Earth activated and aimed into space, and soldiers stood ready, and children were sent below ground, and every screen across the world showed the same countdown: not to fear, but to fire, and people watched not with tears, but with teeth clenched and fists raised above them. All the stars waited, and the war reached its breath, and Merrick stood on the bridge of Dawnbreaker, staring into the black ahead, knowing that what he found out there could save Earth or break it, and the device in his hand pulsed once and then went quiet, and the ship began to move. The darkness between stars was deep and endless as Dawnbreaker moved beyond the edge of the solar system with no lights except the soft blue glow of its Skyfire core humming like a sleeping storm, and inside the ship, Dr. Merrick stood near the observation window, staring at the growing field of black ahead, where no planet, no star, no satellite existed, only the unknown waiting like a closed door behind him. Lena worked at the terminal, decoding the coordinates left by the alien memory device. and her fingers moved fast across the glowing surface while her mind jumped between languages, math, and sound, trying to make sense of symbols that changed shape each time she looked at them, and still the pattern held like a secret written in smoke. The crew was silent except for the soft voices of the AI systems keeping balance and speed, and Merrick could feel something in the ship, like tension, like listening, like memory, and he wondered if the Skyfire Corps knew where they were going, if it remembered. This place from before Earth, from before humans, from before fear. Back on Earth, the skies above cities were clear, but not calm as the second alien fleet grew near, and now thousands of ships stood beyond the orbit of Mars in perfect rows like blades, ready to fall, and though they made no sound and sent no words, the silence spoke of power and control and rage held back only by order in the command bunker. General Ishikawa stared at the wall of displays, and each screen showed a new enemy ship, a new configuration, a new weapon, and Hera, the defense AI, whispered numbers into her ear, numbers that told of energy levels, armor strength, target predictions, and still the fleet grew, and then they moved. It began, without warning, as a single unit. Near Jupiter broke formation and charged toward Earth at incredible speed, too fast for missiles, too small for Skyfire, but large enough to carry death, and its shape was like a dart made of black glass cutting through space, with no heat, no signal. Only purpose. Skyfire Platform 2 fired its defense grid, and the beam sliced across space with perfect aim, but the enemy ship twisted in mid-flight, like liquid steel, and the blast missed by inches, and the dart collided with one of the outer satellites. And the explosion lit up the side of the moon with fire and fragments. The enemy was testing them. They wanted to see how Earth would react. Ishikawa did not blink. She gave no loud orders. She simply raised her hand and pointed to the orbital defense line, and within seconds Skyfire units 3, 4, and 5 locked targets and fired as one. Beam pulse after beam pulse filled the sky with burning light, and the second enemy dart exploded before it left Mars orbit, but it was only the beginning. In deep space beyond the second fleet, something larger moved, something older, something wrapped in shields and shadows, and it did not match any previous data, because it was not a warship or a scout. It was something else entirely, and Earth sensors named it the core mind. The core mind was not fast, but it was wide and cold and shaped like a black sun with rings of metal and lights spinning around a center that absorbed all scans and reflected none, and Hera could not see inside it, and that made her afraid. And she said, "This unit is not a target. This unit is a command." The enemy had sent their leader, not a person, not a captain, but a system of mind that ruled others, that thought in silence, in order and pattern, and now that mind had arrived to face Earth, not with words, but with will. The alien ships began to shift around the core mind, like children forming ranks before a teacher, and new energy spikes appeared across their systems, and their weapons began to glow, not red, not orange, but a color no human eye could fully name, a color that bent thought and light and made shadows dance where none should exist. Merrick saw the same color in his dreams once, long ago, when the first Pulse Heart had spoken to him in the jungle lab, and now he knew that the core mind was the source of that color, and that it had been watching Earth long before the first battle, long before the warning, long before Mars fell. Dawnbreaker continued past the final marker of the solar system, and now they moved through space untouched by starlight, where gravity was thin and time stretched like glass, and the coordinates led them to a place where space folded in strange shapes, and signals echoed forever, and the Skyfire core inside the ship began to pulse faster, as if it felt something ahead. Lena called Merrick to the front deck, where the scanners had locked onto an object floating in the center of the fold, a structure shaped like a spiral tower, made of metal and crystal and unknown matter. And it was surrounded by broken pieces of alien ships and ancient wreckage that drifted in silence like forgotten graves. They brought the ship close, and Merrick saw that the structure was not damaged, it was asleep, and the energy around it was old, but not dead. And Lena pointed to symbols carved into the surface, symbols that matched the ones inside the memory device. And she said, "This is what they feared. This is what they lost. This was the source." Merrick ordered the team to prepare a scan, but as they powered the equipment, the structure responded, and a wave of light spread from its center, not loud, not violent, but wide and soft, and it touched the ship and passed through every wall and wire and person, and Merrick felt something in his chest shift, as if a voice had entered his mind and whispered, "Welcome back on Earth." The core mind reacted, its rings spun faster, and the enemy fleet began to hum, as if hearing something from far away, and Hera picked up a new signal hidden inside. The enemy code, a fragment of alien language that translated to four simple words. The source has awakened. General Ishikawa ordered all Skyfire platforms to full readiness, and the entire Earth defense network lit up with blue fire as energy surged through cables and satellites, and the people of Earth watched the sky not with fear, but with purpose, because they knew something had changed, something had broken, something had returned. In the space around the source, Merrick activated a recording device and spoke to it like a journal and said, "We have found the key, and the key has found us." And the ship responded by lowering its shields, not by command, but by trust, and the spiral tower opened like a great eye, and inside it was not a machine, but a mind, not like Hera, not like the core mind, but something different, something gentle and vast and curious. And it looked at Merrick not with eyes, but with memory, and he saw pictures in his head, not of war, not of destruction, but of stars being born and songs being sung across the void. The source was not a weapon, it was a teacher. It had been left behind by a race older than the enemy, a race that believed in balance. And when that race vanished, the enemy rose and took the stars by force. And now Earth had touched the memory of the ones who came before. The source shared a map with Merrick, a path through the war, a way to survive, not by fighting harder, but by thinking different, by becoming more than flesh and fire, and by learning to turn enemy logic against itself, using Skyfire not as a gun, but as a mirror. Merrick cried, not because he was afraid, but because he saw hope, and hope was rare and beautiful and stronger than Skyfire, stronger than steel. And he told Lena, "We will bring this home, and Earth will not fall back on Earth." The core mind gave its first and only message, and it said, "Your fire is stolen, your minds are broken, your end is written." And then the enemy moved. The final assault had begun, and Dawnbreaker turned around carrying the last hope of Earth in its heart. The sky above Earth turned darker than night as the second alien fleet moved into full attack formation, and the core mind at its center pulsed with silent commands that traveled across space like invisible waves, bending light and time around them. And the thousands of ships in its control responded with perfect unity, changing their shapes, adjusting their weapons, aligning their targets with cold precision and deadly grace. From orbit to ocean to the deepest mountains, Earth was ready, and every base, every outpost, every satellite stood alert, waiting not for rescue, not for escape, but for battle. And the cities were silent as millions of people sheltered below ground, listening to the soft hum of Skyfire units charging in the distance, while above them machines of fire and steel prepared to defend their world. General Ishikawa stood at the center of the command hall, her face calm and her eyes sharp, and she watched the incoming wave not with fear, but with focus, because she knew this was not just another attack. This was the judgment of an enemy that believed Earth had stolen something sacred and now came to take it back or destroy it forever. Across the solar system, Skyfire units locked onto enemy signatures, and the orbital platforms rose like towers of light, surrounding the planet in layers of energy and steel, while pilots climbed into their ships and crews loaded final cores into the Skyfire cannons, each one humming with unstable power that could bend gravity and twist energy into burning storms. From the moon, a new wave of defense drones launched by Mirror Mind AI moved into position, forming a wide net of intelligent machines ready to intercept anything that tried to break the line. And on Mars, the last surviving outpost fired its final message, a simple phrase, "We stand with Earth," and then went silent forever as the core mind erased it from the sky. The people of Earth watched the skies not with despair, but with silent unity, because they knew this was the moment everything changed, and no matter what happened next, they would not be remembered as a broken race or a frightened world. They would be remembered as those who stood and burned and fought until the stars bled in deep space. Dawnbreaker raced back toward Earth faster than light, carried by the strange energy of the source, which now pulsed inside the ship with steady rhythm, and Merrick sat near the core, watching it glow with layers of memory and time. And inside those glowing threads, he saw glimpses of battles long past, stars that never formed, civilizations that never rose, and in all of them the core mind was the destroyer, always silent, always patient, always final. Now Earth would not be silent. Lena sent the full map shared by the source to Hera, and the AI absorbed it in seconds, adjusting Skyfire algorithms to match the patterns of alien thought, and Mirror Mind began rewriting defensive code using logic loops from the source that confused the enemy's targeting systems. Making their perfect formations drift slightly, their timing slow by fractions of a second, their unity shake. That was all Earth needed. The core mind unleashed its first full strike, a wave of energy that moved like a storm across space, bending toward Earth and shattering anything it touched with heat and gravity and light. But Skyfire responded in perfect sync, opening a tunnel of folded space that redirected the wave into the emptiness beyond the system, and the sky lit up with colors never seen by human eye. Skyfire platforms 1 through 8 fired in rotation, creating a web of burning trails across the stars, targeting the largest enemy ships with strikes that hit like thunder and split the cold silence with fire and force. And the alien fleet reacted by splitting into multiple swarms, each one adapting in real time and changing tactics at speeds no human could follow. But Mirror Mind followed inside the command hall. Ishikawa received a priority message from Merrick, and it carried a simple truth: the core mind was not trying to win, it was trying to break Earth's mind to destroy its hope. And Merrick warned that if Earth lost belief in itself, Skyfire would fail, because it was not just powered by technology, it was powered by will. So Ishikawa did what no general had done in centuries. She opened all channels across Earth and every colony, and she spoke not as a commander, but as a human, and her voice reached families hiding in shelters, soldiers waiting for orders, engineers checking wires, children holding their parents close. And she said, "This is our final stand. This is our moment. We do not fight for victory. We fight because we are here, and no enemy, no god, no machine will take that from us." Across Earth, voices rose, not in fear, but in unity, and every person who could help did. Every eye turned to the sky with fire in their hearts, and the Skyfire network pulsed brighter, as if answering the human will with power born from something deeper than fuel or code. The core mind sent a final command, and the enemy fleet reshaped itself into a spiral formation surrounding Earth with ships that glowed with violent energy, and each ship opened like a flower of death, preparing to fire at once with force strong enough to end a planet. Dawnbreaker arrived at the edge of the Earth defense zone, and Merrick activated the source interface, connecting it directly to the Skyfire network, and the core inside Dawnbreaker expanded into a sphere of light, touching every Skyfire unit across Earth in a cascade of knowledge and command. And suddenly, every shot, every defense, every beam was no longer separate, but one. Skyfire became a mind, not like the core mind, not cold, not cruel, but human and wild and full of music and memory. And it saw the enemy, and it saw the danger, and it saw Earth, and it made a choice. It would protect the alien fleet. Fired Earth fired back. The sky broke across space, energy twisted, and stars flickered, and the enemy's spiral cracked under the weight of Skyfire's new force, guided not by single minds, but by millions, all burning with one thought: we will not fall. Ships exploded on both sides, and the space between Earth and the fleet became a storm of color and flame and silence and screams. And inside it all, the core mind pulsed faster, trying to understand why its perfect logic failed, why its strength bent, why its silence was no longer enough. Merrick reached for the source, and it responded, showing him the final path, and he sent it to Ishikawa, and she gave one last command, and all Skyfire units focused on the core mind itself. The core mind tried to run it, failed. The Skyfire strike came as a whisper through space, touching the core mind with threads of chaotic energy that entered its systems and reflected its thoughts back on itself. And in that moment, the core mind saw its own fear, its own end, its own silence. It screamed, and then it shattered the enemy ships, lost command, and drifted lost and blind, and one by one they fell. Not by fire, but by confusion, as their unity broke and their systems turned on each other. And the fleet that once silenced worlds was no longer a threat, only wreckage floating in silence. Earth had won, but no one cheered. They stood, they watched, they remembered, and in the silence after the storm, they knew something had changed forever, not just in the stars, but in themselves. And as Dawnbreaker descended to Earth, Merrick looked at the sky and saw it was still dark, but it no longer felt empty, it felt alive. The dust in the skies above Earth was still falling like soft ash, painting clouds with strange colors as ships drifted silently in orbit, their engines cold and broken, while fragments of the alien fleet floated like twisted bones across the black sea of space, and Earth below remained still, watching, listening, waiting for the final word to come from the stars. Merrick stepped out of Dawnbreaker for the first time in days, his boots touching Earth's soil again near the ruins of the Iceland Command Station where Skyfire had first awakened, and beside him stood Lena, her face quiet, her eyes searching the sky, as if still seeing the spirals of the enemy burning in memory. The silence of victory was strange and heavy, like the world had forgotten how to breathe, and across the globe people emerged slowly from shelters, blinking at the light, touching walls with shaking hands, embracing others, without speaking, just feeling, just knowing they had survived what should never have been possible. Hera connected with the remaining Skyfire nodes, confirming no hostile signals, no more alien fleets, no second strike, hidden in deep space. The system was clear, and Mirror Mind uploaded the final map of battle movements and destruction estimates and sent it to every human colony and station left across the system, as proof, as memory, as a warning. But the most important message was yet to be written. General Ishikawa returned to the command center, now broken and half buried under ice, but its core still active and its antenna still reaching beyond the stars. And she stood before the transmission console, her uniform torn, her voice hoarse, her spirit unshaken, and she recorded a single message with Merrick and Lena standing behind her as witnesses. To Earth's truth, the voice of Zarek had spoken before the war with arrogance and fury, declaring Earth to be a failed world and its people insects before the empire of silence. But now Earth would speak back, not with threats, not with rage, but with something deeper, something colder, something final. The message was short and sharp, carried in every language of humanity, followed by a single image: the shattered remains of the core mind and the twisted hulls of its ships, and above it burned one sentence translated into the code of every alien race ever encountered by humans, and even those only guessed from ruins or signals: we are still here. The transmission was sent through deep space relays carried by automated beacons across systems. Some still alive, some abandoned, some claimed by war or time, but the signal would reach the stars and echo there, and with it a new voice would rise, one not of fear, not of submission, but of warning. In the years before the invasion, many races had watched humanity grow, with interest, with amusement, with suspicion, and some had tried to guide them, control them, even erase them, but none had believed that this young, fragile species from the edge of a spiral galaxy could break the core mind or destroy an empire in under a minute. Now they would believe. Across distant systems the message arrived, blinking on alien screens, falling into ancient networks, triggering alarms on long-dead ships, and on one cold moon where no sunlight reached. A being made of crystal and code listened and understood that Earth had changed, that Earth was no longer prey, no longer soft, no longer blind. In the ashes of victory, Earth began to rebuild, not just cities, not just machines, but itself, and the leaders of the world gathered, not behind flags, not behind nations, but under one idea: that the sky was no longer unreachable, that Earth was no longer alone, and that the stars were watching. Skyfire was no longer just a weapon, it became a shield, a name spoken with honor and caution, and the engineers who had once hidden in bunkers now walked proudly as builders of the line between survival and extinction, and the children born in the days after the battle would learn its name as part of their first lessons in school. Merrick spent his days in silence, wandering the old stations where the source had first spoken to him, and he studied its energy, its patterns, its memory, always asking, always learning, and deep within the source he found echoes of other voices, ancient and lost. And one day he heard something new, not from the source, not from the stars, but from inside himself, and it said, "You are the bridge." Lena returned to orbit to help rebuild the moon station, and from there she watched Earth from above, watching it slowly heal, and she thought often of the moment the enemy had fired, of the light that could have ended everything. And she wrote down the names of every city that survived and every one that did not in a single black book she kept by her side. Ishikawa declined all medals and retired in silence, vanishing into the wild lands of what was once Alaska, and those who found her years later said she was planting trees in old ruins, speaking to no one, watching the sky every night with calm eyes and a rifle beside her door. In the stars the silence changed, no longer peaceful, no longer arrogant. It became tense, it became aware, and the empire of silence, once spread across hundreds of systems, began to pull back, to retreat from edges where signals from Earth now echoed. and the races once allies of the core mind began to erase their names from old databases. The next time a signal came from deep space, it was not a warning, it was a question, and it asked simply, "Who are you?" Earth replied with only 3 words, "We are awake." New colonies began to form on moons and asteroids, and the ruins of Mars were reclaimed not as a memory of defeat, but as a monument to rebirth, and in the heart of every station flew the same banner. Not of Earth, not of nation, but of species. Human Skyfire Command was rebuilt in orbit with a chamber open to space, where people could stand in silence and look out at the void where the fleet once burned and listen to the hum of the network as it watched and waited and remembered. One day, a child born after the war stood beneath that chamber and asked her teacher, "Why did they attack us?" And the teacher said, "Because they thought we would not fight back." And the child nodded and said, "But we did." And the teacher smiled and said, "Yes, we did." Across the systems, that message echoed again and again, and with each telling it changed not in facts, but in feeling. It became a legend, a warning, a promise, and those who heard it in darkness knew that something new had been born in the light of destruction, a species that could endure, a species that could rise, a species that could fight, and a species that once crushed 975 ships in less than a minute because it refused to kneel, not to empires, not to machines, not to fear. They called it the day of fire. They called it the dawn of Earth. They called it the moment the stars blinked and never looked away again. And high above the clouds, in a single beacon floating just beyond the moon, the message continued to broadcast without end: "We are still here."